Hey, I'm Simeon. At its peak, NASA received 4.4% of the entire United States federal budget. Today, it receives less than 0.4%. That tenfold collapse in political will is the real reason humans haven't been near the moon since 1972, and it's why Artemis 2 took this long to happen. This isn't just a return to the moon. It's the end of the longest pause in the history of human exploration. Apollo was not primarily a science program. It was a geopolitical response to a perceived military threat. On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite ever put into orbit. A month later came Sputnik 2, carrying the first living creature into space, a dog named Laika. In December, the United States attempted its own first satellite launch on live television, and the rocket exploded on the pad. American officials understood that a nation capable of putting objects into orbit could also deliver weapons anywhere on Earth. Both the United States and the Soviet Union were competing for political allegiance of newly independent nations across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and technological achievement in space was a direct demonstration of military and industrial capability. When Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space in April 1961, President Kennedy committed to landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. That decision was driven by national security, not scientific curiosity. At its peak in 1966, NASA's budget represented 4.4% of all U.S. federal spending. The equivalent today would be over $100 billion a year. Instead, NASA currently receives roughly $25 billion. That funding level was a direct product of Cold War pressure and has never been matched since. Apollo 11 landed in July 1969. 5 more successful landing missions followed. On December 14, 1972, Gene Cernan climbed back into the lunar module on Apollo 17 and became the last human being to stand on the moon. 3 factors ended the program. The United States had achieved its objective. Beating the Soviet Union to the moon was the finish line, and crossing it removed the political justification for continued Apollo-level spending. Richard Nixon, who became president in January 1969, prioritized an affordable, sustainable space program over continued lunar missions. He redirected funding toward the space shuttle. Apollo infrastructure, workforce, and momentum wound down accordingly. The Soviet Union itself collapsed in the early 90s, removing the competitor that had made the entire enterprise feel urgent in the first place. Without an existential rival and without a geopolitical objective, Congress had no appetite to fund lunar exploration at Apollo levels. The program ended and was not replaced with anything of comparable ambition for 5 decades. 53 years is long enough that everyone who walked on the moon is either elderly or dead. The engineers who designed Saturn V retired decades ago. Their institutional knowledge was not systematically preserved or transferred. When NASA developed the Space Launch System for Artemis, engineers had to reconstruct solutions that had already been worked out in the 60s. Some original Apollo documentation had been lost. Some manufacturing techniques had to be rebuilt from scratch. From Kennedy's speech in May 1961 to the Apollo 11 landing took 8 years, using 1960s technology and manual calculations. Getting humans back to the moon under Artemis took longer than the entire original Apollo program, despite modern computing, material science, and engineering tools that didn't exist in the 1960s. The difference is not technological, it's political. China has stated its intention to land astronauts on the moon by 2030. It has landed rovers on a lunar far side, returned samples from the moon, and built an operational space station. American politicians and military officials have described this as a new space race. The comparison to the Cold War has limits. The Soviet Union maintained thousands of nuclear warheads in a state of near readiness. The mutual threat of annihilation was real and immediate for anyone alive during that period. That level of existential pressure produced Apollo's funding levels. The current competition with China, though significant, does not carry the same stakes, and the pace of Artemis development reflects that. Apollo's objective was to land on the moon and return. 12 astronauts did that across 6 missions, and no permanent infrastructure was left behind. Artemis is designed around a different goal, a sustained human presence near the lunar South Pole, with the longer-term aim of developing the operational experience needed for crewed Mars missions. The distinction matters because sustained presence requires sustained funding across multiple administrations, which Apollo never had to maintain. Whether Artemis survives future budget cycles and political shifts is unknown. Apollo was abandoned once its objective was met. If Artemis's objective is less clearly defined, that could work either for or against its longer-term survival. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen have splashed down safely after traveling further from Earth than any humans since December 1972. They flew around the moon, saw its surface directly, and broke the distance record that had stood since Apollo 17. Artemis 2 was a crewed test flight, systems, life support, and navigation validation ahead of a surface landing on a future mission. The 50-year gap is closed. Whether a permanent lunar presence actually gets built depends on the same thing Apollo depended on: sustained political will across changing administrations, budgets, and priorities. Apollo showed that reaching the moon is an engineering problem. Staying there is a political one. If you like the video, please consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.